This phase feels lonely for a reason, and no one talks about it honestly. Because if they did, they'd have to admit something uncomfortable. That the loneliness you're feeling right now isn't a flaw. It's a filter. At some point, growth stops rewarding you with people. It starts costing you people. You don't lose everyone all at once. It happens slowly, quietly. Conversations fade. Invites stop coming. Your phone stays silent longer than it used to. And you start wondering, did I mess something up? Did I change too much? Why does it feel like I'm doing everything right, but ending up alone? Here's the truth most people won't tell you. You didn't fall behind. You moved ahead. Loneliness doesn't show up when you're stuck. It shows up when you're becoming someone your old life can't keep up with. When you stop numbing yourself with noise. When you stop living for approval. When you stop needing constant validation. The crowd disappears. Because crowds don't follow people who are building something real. They follow comfort. They follow familiarity. They follow what feels easy. And you chose something harder. You chose growth without applause, discipline without praise, progress without witnesses. That's why it feels quiet. That's why it hurts. Most people never reach this phase, not because they're incapable, but because the loneliness scares them back into mediocrity. They go back to old habits, just to feel connected again. They stay available, just to feel needed. They slow down, just so they're not left behind. But you didn't. And that's why this phase exists. This is the phase where life starts testing one thing only. Can you keep going when there's nothing entertaining you? No cheers, no external motivation, no constant reassurance that you're on the right path, just silence. And your choices. And here's something important. This loneliness isn't telling you you're unlovable. It's telling you something else entirely. It's telling you that you've outgrown the version of life that needed everyone's attention to feel alive. You're not lonely because you're empty. You're lonely because you're full of something new and not everyone fits anymore. This phase feels lonely because you're being rewired. Your priorities are shifting. Your tolerance for nonsense is lowering. Your standards are changing. And that creates distance. Distance from people who only knew the old you. Distance from environments that thrived on distraction. Distance from routines that kept you comfortable but small. Loneliness is just the space growth needs to breathe. Think about it. Nothing significant is built in a crowd. Strength is built alone. Skill is refined alone. Clarity is found alone. No one becomes dangerous while being constantly entertained. And that's what this phase is doing to you. It's sharpening you. The silence you hate right now, that's where focus is born. The isolation you're questioning, that's where identity hardens. You're learning who you are when there's no one watching. You're learning how you move without applause. You're discovering what actually matters once the noise dies. This is not the phase where you feel powerful. This is the phase where power is being built quietly. And if you quit now, if you run back to comfort just to feel connected, you'll never know what you are about to become. This phase feels lonely for a reason. Because it's not meant to last forever. It's meant to change you. You're not lonely by accident. You're lonely because you stopped fitting in. At some point, you changed. Maybe slowly, maybe painfully, but you changed. And when you changed, the conversations stopped making sense. The jokes stopped being funny. The places stopped feeling right. The people stopped feeling familiar. That's not a flaw. That's a signal. Most people don't realize this. Loneliness isn't always the absence of people. Sometimes it's the absence of alignment. You outgrew the room and the room didn't follow. So now you're here, walking alone, thinking alone, building in silence. And part of you wonders, is something wrong with me? No, something is finally right. Because growth isolates before it elevates. It pulls you away before it pushes you forward. You don't lose people because you're failing. You lose people because you're no longer playing the same game. They want comfort. You chose discomfort. They want approval. You chose progress. They want now. You chose later. And that decision has a price. Lonely mornings, quiet nights, no one checking in, no one clapping yet. But listen carefully, this phase isn't punishing you. It's protecting you. If everyone stayed, you'd stay small. If everyone understood, you'd never sharpen. If everyone supported you, you'd never learn self-trust. Right now, you're being forced to rely on yourself, your discipline, your mind, your consistency. And that's uncomfortable because it removes your excuses. There's no one to blame, no one to lean on, no one to hide behind. Just you and the truth. That's why this phase feels heavy, because it demands ownership. Most people avoid this phase their entire lives. They stay surrounded but stagnant, busy but empty, connected but lost. You didn't. You stepped into a phase where growth matters more than comfort, and comfort always leaves first. So if you feel unseen right now, good. If you feel ignored, good. If it feels like nobody understands what you're becoming, good. This is where identity is forged, and the people you'll become next. They won't be built in crowds. Nobody prepares you for this phase. They talk about success. They talk about discipline. They talk about consistency, habits, routines. But they don't talk about this silence. The silence where your phone stops lighting up. The silence where the people who used to be around don't call anymore. The silence where it feels like you're walking alone. Without validation. Without applause. Without reassurance. And this is where most people panic. They think something is wrong. They think, why does it feel like I'm being left behind? Why does it feel like everyone else is moving on without me? Why does this path feel so empty? Here's the truth nobody tells you. It's lonely because it's working. This phase wasn't designed to be crowded. It wasn't designed to be social. It wasn't designed to be comfortable. It was designed to separate you. Growth demands distance. Clarity demands quiet. Transformation demands space. You cannot become someone new while staying fully connected to everything that made you who you were. That's why distractions fall away. That's why old conversations stop making sense. That's why certain people disappear without explanation. Not because you're better than them. Not because they're wrong. But because you're changing direction. And direction always creates distance. Right now, life is asking you a question very few people answer honestly. Can you keep going when no one is watching? When no one is praising you? When the results aren't loud yet? Because anyone can work when they're supported. Anyone can stay consistent when it feels rewarding. But the people who actually change their lives are the ones who continue in silence. This phase feels lonely because you're no longer performing. You're building. You're no longer trying to be seen. You're trying to be better. And that requires isolation. Not forever, just long enough. Long enough to break old patterns. Long enough to hear your own thoughts again. Long enough to stop confusing noise with progress. If you quit now, nothing dramatic will happen. That's the danger. You'll slowly drift back into what's familiar. Back into distractions. Back into comfort disguised as connection. Back into routines that feel full but produce nothing. And months from now, you'll feel that same quiet dissatisfaction again. Only deeper, only heavier. But if you stay in this phase, if you stop fighting the loneliness and start using it, this becomes the period you look back on and say, this is where everything changed. Because this is where discipline becomes identity. This is where motivation dies and resolve replaces it. This is where you stop needing outside validation. And once that happens, you're no longer dependent on the world to move. You move regardless. This phase feels lonely because this is the exact point where most people quit. Not when it's hard in the beginning. Not when motivation is high and everyone is cheering. But right here, when the noise disappears. When nobody texts to check on you. When nobody claps for your effort. When progress is quiet and slow. When it feels like you're working twice as hard for half the results. This is the moment that filters people out. Because now there's no hype carrying you. No validation pushing you forward. No external pressure forcing you to continue. It's just you and the question, am I really built for this? Most people answer that question by stopping. They go back to what feels familiar. They reconnect with distractions. They lower their standards and call it balance. They soften their discipline and call it self-care. And slowly, quietly, they return to who they used to be. Not because they failed, but because they got uncomfortable being alone. Here's the truth most people never hear. Loneliness is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you've outgrown your old environment. Growth always isolates before it upgrades. When you're changing, you don't fit anywhere. Your old life doesn't recognize you anymore. Your future life hasn't fully accepted you yet. So you exist in between. That in-between space is brutal. It's silent, it's uncertain, and it demands something most people don't have: consistency without reassurance. See, when you were average, people understood you. When you were comfortable, you belonged. When you were predictable, you were included. But growth makes you unfamiliar. Discipline makes you inconvenient. Standards make you rare. And rarity is lonely. This phase is training something deeper than skill. It's training your ability to keep going without applause. Because if you can only work when you're seen, you'll never survive success. If you can only push when you're encouraged, you'll fold under pressure. If you need people around to stay disciplined, you don't own your discipline. It owns you. This phase is asking one question. Can you keep showing up when nobody notices? Can you wake up early when nobody expects it? Can you train when there's no audience? Can you stay sharp while everyone else relaxes? Can you stay focused when it feels pointless? Most people can't. That's why most people never break out of average. Loneliness doesn't mean you're losing direction. It means you're losing tolerance for distractions. And that's dangerous in the best way. Because once you learn how to move alone, you stop being controlled by opinions. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing permission. You become self-directed. And self-directed people don't stay small. This is preparation. And if you stay here long enough, if you don't run back to comfort, if you keep... When you start changing, really changing, you stop resonating with the same conversations, the same louder. That's not emptiness. That's separation. Your eyes. This is where most people break. Not because the work is too hard, but because the silence messes with them. They start questioning themselves. The loneliness teaches you something important. It forces you to sit with your own thoughts. It forces you to face your weaknesses. It forces you to build self-trust. When no one is watching, you learn who you really are. That's why this phase feels heavy, because it's refining you. If you run from it, you'll stay average. If you endure it, feeling misunderstood, feeling isolated, good. That means you're not distracted anymore. That means your attention is turning inward. That means you're building something real. This phase isn't forever, but the strength you're gaining from it will be. Stay here. Don't numb it. Don't escape it. Don't explain yourself out of it. Let the loneliness do its job. Because when this phase ends, you won't just re-enter the world. You'll return with clarity, with direction, with standard, and the same people who don't see.
You're alone. Not abandoned, not unloved, just separated. Separated from distractions, separated from comfort, separated from the need to explain yourself. This is the space where your mind finally gets quiet enough to hear the truth. Most people panic here. They interpret loneliness as failure. They rush back to noise, to validation, to people who make them feel normal again. And the moment they do, the phase ends. Not because it was complete, but because they ran from it. You didn't, you stayed. That's why this phase feels heavy. That's why nights feel longer. That's why motivation feels colder but sharper. You're being rewired. When you're surrounded by people, your identity is reinforced for you. They remind you who you were, what you used to be, what they expect you to remain. Isolation removes all of that. And when there's no one left reflecting you back to yourself, you're forced to decide who you really are. This phase strips you of borrowed confidence, borrowed opinions, borrowed motivation. All that's left is raw intention. And intention is powerful. That's why this phase doesn't ask you to be happy. It asks you to be honest. Honest about your weaknesses. Honest about your patterns. Honest about what hasn't been working. You start seeing clearly, not dramatically, quietly. You realize how much of your old life was reaction-based. How much energy you wasted maintaining an image. How much potential leaked into things that didn't matter. Loneliness becomes less emotional and more instructional. You begin to understand that this phase isn't meant to be shared. It's meant to shape you. This is why progress feels invisible right now. Why there's no applause. Why nobody is checking in on your growth. Because if people were watching, you'd perform. And performance destroys transformation. And this phase demands privacy. Privacy to think. Privacy to fail. Privacy to rebuild your internal standards. Eventually, something shifts. You stop craving company. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing reassurance. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become self-rooted. And once that happens, loneliness stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like alignment. You're no longer lonely because you're missing people. You're alone because you're protecting momentum. And that's when you know this phase is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
This is usually the point where people start questioning themselves, not because they're weak, but because the silence gets loud. You've done the hard part already. You pulled away. You stopped explaining. You stopped chasing validation. You stopped needing noise to feel alive. And now you're here, alone with your thoughts, alone with your habits, alone with the truth. This is where most people turn back, not because they can't handle the work, but because they can't handle themselves. When you're alone long enough, you start seeing patterns. You notice how often you used distractions to avoid effort, how often you used people to avoid responsibility, how often you blamed circumstances instead of choices. And that realization hurts more than failure ever did, because failure can be explained. Loneliness can be framed as bad luck. But self-awareness? That has nowhere to hide. You start realizing some of the pain wasn't caused by others. Some of the stagnation was self-inflicted. Some of the limits were optional. And that's uncomfortable, because now you can't pretend anymore. This is why this phase feels lonely. Not because you are missing people, but because you are shedding illusions. Illusions about who you were. Illusions about how easy it was supposed to be. Illusions about how long growth actually takes. Transformation always creates a gap between who you were and who you're becoming. And that gap feels empty. You don't fit where you came from anymore, but you haven't fully stepped into what's next. So for a while, you walk alone. No applause, no reassurance, no clear sign that it's working. Just quiet progress, just discipline stacking on discipline. Just small wins no one sees, just days that feel repetitive but necessary. This is where patience is built. Not the passive kind, the disciplined kind. The kind that keeps showing up even when nothing looks different on the surface. Because underneath, everything is changing. Your values are shifting. Your tolerance is sharpening. Your standards are rising. You're learning how to be alone without being lost. And that skill, that's rare. People who can sit with themselves without drowning in distraction become dangerous in a world addicted to noise. They don't need constant stimulation. They don't crave approval. They don't fold under boredom. They build quietly, relentlessly. So if this phase feels heavy, don't rush to escape it. You're not behind. You're not missing out. You're not doing something wrong. You're in the middle of a refinement process most people never enter. And when it ends, you won't need to announce it. The results will do that for you. This is the part nobody prepares you for. Not the start, not the excitement. This middle stretch, where nothing is wrong, but nothing feels rewarding either. You're not failing here. You're not lost. You're not going backward. You're in the phase where your results haven't caught up with your discipline yet. And this is where most people disappear, not because they couldn't do it, but because they couldn't wait. They expected validation too early. They wanted proof before patience paid off. They wanted applause while still building the foundation. But growth doesn't work like that. It's quiet before it's obvious. Right now, your effort lives underground, like roots growing deeper where no one can see them. No compliments, No hype, no sudden breakthroughs. Just work, repeated, unnoticed. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The loneliness is intentional. Life clears the room so you can hear yourself again. So you're not influenced. So you're not distracted. So you're not pulled in 100 directions by people who don't know where they're going. Solitude sharpens you. Noise dulls you. And right now, your mind is being sharpened. You're learning who you are when there's no encouragement. When nobody is checking in. When no one is clapping. That's the version of you that actually lasts. Anyone can be motivated when things are exciting. Very few people can stay consistent when things feel flat. That's what this phase is testing. Not your talent, not your potential, your patience. Can you keep going when progress is invisible? Can you stay disciplined when the reward is still far away? Can you trust yourself without external reassurance? Because the people who make it through this phase don't become loud winners. They become stable, unshakable, calm, grounded. They don't need to announce their growth. They don't seek validation. They move differently because they've already proven something to themselves. This phase is teaching you restraint, teaching you humility, teaching you focus. And one day, quietly, you'll notice something has changed. Your reactions are slower. Your standards are higher. Your tolerance for nonsense is lower. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't chase attention. You don't panic under pressure. That's when you realize the loneliness wasn't emptiness. It was training. And the people who couldn't survive this phase, they'll wonder how you changed overnight. They won't see the months you stayed invisible. They won't know about the nights you doubted yourself and still showed up. They won't understand the silence you endured. And that's fine. This phase was never about being seen. It was about becoming. At some point in this phase, something strange happened. You stop wanting your old life back. Not because this phase feels better. It doesn't. It's quieter, harder, colder. But because you've seen too much now, you've seen how distracted you used to be, how available you were, how much of your time you gave away without thinking, how often you confused comfort for happiness. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You try to imagine going back to the noise, back to the constant talking, back to filling silence just so you don't have to sit with yourself. And it feels wrong. Not tempting, not relaxing. Wrong. That's when you know this phase is working. You're not lonely because you lost people. You're lonely because you outgrew patterns. The old version of you needed constant validation, needed people around, needed reassurance. This version doesn't. This version is learning how to stand alone without collapsing. How to move forward without applause. How to build something quietly without telling anyone. That's not weakness, that's stability. Most people never reach this stage because it requires patience, and it requires sitting with unresolved feelings instead of escaping them. It requires trusting a future you can't fully see yet. But you stayed, and that changes you. You start making decisions faster. You stop oversharing. You protect your energy naturally without trying. You don't feel the need to explain every move. You feel more solid, not dramatic or not emotional, just grounded. This is where discipline stops feeling forced. This is where focus becomes your default. This is where loneliness turns into clarity. You begin to realize something important. If you leave now, you don't go back to who you were before. You go back weaker, because now you'd be quitting something you finally understand. So you stay, even when it's quiet, even when it's boring, even when no one knows what you're building. You stay because you know this phase isn't random. It's necessary. And deep down, you know this. The life you want doesn't start when people notice you. It starts when you become someone who doesn't need to be noticed to keep going. This phase feels lonely because it has to be. If everyone understood what you're doing, if everyone supported it, if everyone stayed close, then it wouldn't be growth. It would be comfort dressed up as ambition. You're not isolated because you're failing. You're isolated because you're changing. There are versions of you that only exist in silence, versions that can't survive noise, versions that need distance to form. The world doesn't see that part yet, and it's not supposed to. You don't build strength while being watched. You don't develop discipline while being entertained. You don't become someone dangerous while being understood. This phase strips you. It takes away the distractions. It removes the audience. It forces you to sit with yourself. No applause, no validation, no reassurance. And that's the test. Most people quit here. Not because it's too hard, but because it's too quiet. They mistake solitude for failure. They mistake distance for rejection. They mistake silence for stagnation. But you know better now. This is where clarity forms. This is where identity hardens. This is where you stop performing and start becoming. You're learning how to move without being seen. How to work without being praised. How to believe without being encouraged. That's real power. One day, this phase will end. People will reappear. Opportunities will surface. Your results will speak. And when that day comes, they'll call it overnight success. They'll say, you changed. They'll ask, how did you do it? They won't see the nights you kept going without witnesses. They won't feel the weight you carried alone. They won't understand the version of you that was built here. And that's okay, because this phase wasn't meant to be shared. It was meant to be survived. So, if it's quiet right now, if it feels empty, if it feels lonely, good. You're not lost. You're not falling behind. You're not being forgotten. You're being prepared. Don't stop.